Well, hey everybody, welcome. I'm Glenn Packiam, joined by Sharon Miller. We're so thrilled that you're joining us for this webinar on marriage and ministry. Hey, as you're entering the webinar, as you're entering the room here, would you just drop in a little bit about yourself, where you're from, the church that you're connected to? That would be super, super helpful. It's going to be a great, power-packed hour that we're going to spend together. Sharon, how are you doing, my friend?
I am doing good. I'm excited for this conversation. It matters a lot. This is actually, for those of you who have been following the podcast or what Barna has been up to, this is a topic that has been kind of on the forefront of our minds and our hearts of caring well for pastors and their marriages. And just to give you guys like a little bit of a taste of what to expect from this hour ahead, because we really want to honor your time, is we're going to be hearing new research from Daniel Copeland, who is the VP of Research at Barna. We are also going to be sharing the launch of a new course related to this. And then we're also going to have a time with some other couples who are in ministry who are married. And so that's kind of how this next hour is going to go.
And before we dive into that, Sharon, I just thought, it'd be great to kind of for us to offer maybe just a little bit of our reaction of why we care about this, why we're even talking about this. Like, in what ways maybe does marriage or does ministry place a particular toll on our marriages? And by the way, just a little administrative note. Thanks for the comment there about the chat being disabled. It's now abled, so you can drop in where you're from and the church that you're at. Sharon, you and Ike co-lead
Mhm.
an incredible church, Bright City in North Carolina. So there's even a different dynamic there. Talk to us a little bit about why this subject matters to you.
Mhm. So first of all, this Friday is actually our 16th anniversary. So
Are you going to Disney World?
I wish. Actually, Ike is currently at this very moment. The reason he's not here on this webinar is he is in New York City with our
Mm,
son. So he's just living it up in New York
amazing,
without
amazing.
me. I'm here working.
Yeah.
But
Congrats, by the way. Congrats on the anniversary coming up. Yeah.
thank you. Thank you. But, this has been close to my heart for two reasons. One is just I am married and leading a church with my spouse. And if you lead a church, you know that the enemy hates the church. Like the church is in his
Mm,
sights all the
mm,
time. Our enemy is coming for the church. But that is especially true if you are leading with your spouse. The enemy is going to come for your marriage. And that is something that we have experienced personally. It's something we need to be on the offense about instead of defense. And
yeah.
so it's personal to me,
Mm,
but then on top of it is we have quite a few peers who their marriages have been taken out in
yes.
ministry or have
Yes.
been
Yes.
sustained critical damage.
Mm,
And that is why about a year ago we at with Barnett started talking about addressing this is realizing
mm,
we also need to be equipping other
mm.
pastors with this support.
It's so true, and it is sobering, isn't it? I mean, I think so. In a couple of weeks, Holly and I will celebrate 24 years of marriage,
Oh,
which is
wow.
crazy. And then this same month, marks 25 years of being in local church ministry for me. She knew what she was getting into, when we got married. But the truth is, she has a call into ministry as well. She trained as a counselor. I say always, for the majority of our marriage, has worked at the church in some way, part-time way. But whether your spouse has a role at the church that's official or formal, ministry is not. If you're married, ministry has a way of involving your spouse. There's a calling that it affects the household, it affects the marriage, and I would love to hear your thoughts on one of the lessons you guys have learned. But let me offer one reflection here for us. I think just there are seasons in life, in marriage. I was telling a younger couple recently, I think there's cycles of seven, and it roughly tracks this way. Your first 7 years, lots that's exciting and fun and new, and maybe you're having children during that season. So you're maybe identifying some of the things that could be issues beneath the surface, but you're skating past them off of good feelings and new experiences and kids, and maybe even the busyness of it. Then the second season of seven, the kids it's just the chaos of raising kids and you're trying to survive. And maybe you're planting a church in that same time, maybe all of that stuff, your ministry is starting to change. For us, it was around that year 14 mark, 13 to 15, somewhere in there, that all of a sudden you come up for air because the kids have gotten older a little bit, and you start to realize, man, there's some things beneath the surface that we've been ignoring or tolerating or getting by. And there's this moment of decision where, are we going to look deeper into ourselves and move towards health, and therefore move towards health in our marriage, or are we going to continue to paper over this, use kind of spiritual jargon, let's just pray more, whatever, or let's just serve the people? And I think that the trap of ministry is, ministry gives you an abundance of excuses to ignore working on yourself and working on your marriage. It's always somebody else's needs, somebody else's, And so for me, I'll just pull the curtain back a tiny bit, then I want to hear you share on this. Um, the work that I had to do is to recognize there's a longing that I have deep inside of me, and in ministry, I'm tending to everybody else's needs and longings. And so my longings then lead to a lie. And the lie is, my spouse is too busy. They don't care about me. My needs are not important. My fears don't matter. This is silly, this whatever. But if you keep pushing down those longings and believing those lies, it starts to leak out. And it leaks out either in creating distance from your spouse, or it leaks out in, binge watching Netflix shows or eating poorly. And one of the data we're going to see is about health habits in the home. And what we need is to take the time to pull back the layer, and to let the gospel shine its light of truth, and to confront some of those things. How about for you and Ike? What are some of the ways you've learned some lessons here through this?
Goodness gracious. I mean, so many, but one that is just at top of mind, like heading into this, looking at the data that has been collected,
Mm,
is the reminder that we are not alone in our
mm,
struggles. Like I think I was raised Presbyterian, let me just say that. And so I was not raised with like talking about spiritual warfare, but I have learned the importance of naming that, because it's so tempting to think the problem is my spouse, or the problem
mm,
is our communication, whatever it is. And it could be that. But one thing that we've also had to name is that there is an enemy that wants to steal, kill, and
mm,
destroy our marriage. And if we are not keeping an eye on that as well, and one of the tools that he uses is also isolation. And
mm,
it's hard when your job depends on you being healthy and your marriage being healthy. And so when things are not even necessarily unhealthy, but you're struggling, it's like, who can you talk to about
mm,
that
mm,
that is safe?
mm.
But one thing that is going to be so interesting, in just a moment, we're going to turn it over to Daniel to share the data. But the data is so fascinating, because you and I were kind of reflecting on this. It doesn't, I looked at the data and I wondered, do pastors still not feel like they can even be honest in this
Mm.
anonymous survey? Because there's a little bit of a disconnect that you'll see between how people are describing the state of their marriage versus the actual, like, how things are going. And it made me think, either we have just settled into this is just how it's going to be, or this imposter syndrome of, I can't let anyone know how it's actually going because no one else is experiencing it the way that I'm experiencing it. And so I feel like that's a good segue,
It's
maybe
great.
over to Daniel, to just let him walk us through some of what Barna has found.
Daniel Copeland, VP of Research, take it away.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Sharon. So nice to be with you all. Everybody, if we've never met before, my name is Daniel Copeland. I lead research for Barna Group. I've been with Barna Group for about 7 years, based out of Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm so delighted to bring this research to you wherever you are. We got a lot to get through, and it's a lot of really interesting data. In so many ways, this is a bit of a dream study to be able to go and really talk to pastors and hear about the well-being of pastors in marriage. So often in Barna research, we talk about the state of the church. We talk about decline of faith amongst next generations. And this is a real opportunity to maybe pull the curtain back a little bit about how are we doing as church leaders, and how our marriage is doing, how is our home life doing, how are we parenting, and what needs do we have that maybe the average congregant doesn't see and the world often doesn't see. And so I'm really excited to share with you some of what we learned. This is going to be a high level overview of what did we learn. Make sure you dig deeper into the report that we wrote on this entire topic to learn more. Um, so we're talking about the pastor's marriage. We're also talking about parenting along the way with this. What you find is so fascinating. So let's dig in. So let's start really big picture. This is going to be really intuitive to all of you, but why do we even need to talk about pastors' relationships? Before we even get to marriage or parenting in the household, why even talk about relationships? So, if you've been in the Barna vicinity for the last few years, you've probably heard this term, or even the research world in general, you've probably heard this term flourishing. Uh, Flourishing is the idea of a way of measuring the core dimensions of a person's life. We've been studying this for several years now. And it's a really great way to just, in a snapshot, understand how is a person or a people group doing. And what you're seeing in front of you right now are 0 to 100 scores. So these aren't percentages, these are scores, kind of a score like you get on a test. So you could think of anything in the 90 range as an A, anything in the 80 range as a B, the 70 range is a C, and on down. And so what you're seeing in the data right here is for pastors, all US adults, and then practicing Christians. Practicing Christians are really faith engaged Christians, those who their faith matters to them and they go to church regularly. You're seeing on a 100-point scale how they are doing in these key attributes of their lives. Relationships. The average US adult gets about almost a B, a C plus, a 79. In their well-being, this is their emotional and physical wellness. Average US adult gets a low C. Finances, one of the hardest areas of the world today. The world just keeps getting more expensive. Uh, a 62, almost pretty much a failing grade for all US adults. For vocation, our purpose, what we feel called to do, average US adult scores a 76. Faith, a 63 of all US adults. And then over here is an aggregate total flourishing. And so before we even dig into marriage, before we dig into parenting, let's acknowledge what pastors' lowest score is. It's their relationships. In flourishing research, relationships is the intersection of my contentment with my relationships and my satisfaction with my relationships. So I have the relationships I need to pursue the things that matter to me in life. I have the support system that I need. And what's so fascinating is over the past several years, even some of the birthplace of Resilient Pastors, an entire initiative, we were really concerned about the vocational wellness of pastors, but sometimes we overlook the relational well-being of pastors, their lowest scoring relational item. It can be so hard for a pastor who is in a congregation for a season to make really well supportive relationships. And maybe our argument would be in this data, well, let's go to the home first. Let's see how is the home life of pastors, and dig deep into how would we bolster the home using research best practices to really care for the pastor overall. So let's start with some demographics. Let's peek inside the pastor's home. Uh, these are actually some of my favorite numbers in this entire study. It changes so much of your perception on the average pastor's home. So let me walk through some of this data for you. So 91% of pastors, this is Protestant pastors, are currently married. Believe it or not, that's an incredibly large number, 9 out of 10. You can see some of the other current marital statuses to the right of that. 3% single, never married, 4% divorced, on and on. 9 out of 10 pastors also have kids. Only 10% do not have children. The average pastor has been married for 25 years. Now, you can read between the lines there that some of that is to do with the demographic package of pastors, that pastors lean a little older in our current church world. But at the same time, how exciting to know that the average pastor, we should celebrate, that's a long marriage. That's exciting. And then 1 out of 3 pastors also has grandchildren. So they've moved into that later season of life where they're parenting their children who are also parents. And they have grandkids who are visiting the home. They've got that next generation, the third generation from them established. Over on the right here, you also see a gender split that is super interesting. Not if 91% of all pastors are currently married, that's 98% for male pastors, but decreased down to only 77% amongst female pastors. A lot more singleness amongst female pastors. Having kids, same trend. 97% of male pastors have at least one child, compared to only 76% of female pastors. So some very clear difference along gender lines. There's denominational lines along this as well. But you get this really interesting picture of who the pastor's home really is. It's highly married. There's a lot of kids. There's even grandkids, long marriages. This next slide is actually probably my favorite piece of data, just because it's so illuminating of what makes the pastor's world different. So if you were to compare the US population to pastors, what would you find when it comes to just those numbers that we just looked at? So first, pastors are incredibly more likely to be married than all US adults. 91% of pastors are currently married today, compared to less than half of all US adults, which is fascinating. So pastors are twice as likely to be married. They're also incredibly more likely to be a parent. 90% of pastors are currently a parent, have a child in their life, whether it's a minor or an adult child, compared to only 61% of US adults. Also, notice the rate there change. So 90% married, 90% have kids, whereas amongst all US adults, there's a bit of a discrepancy where more adults are parents than are married. This is the singleness issue in today's world. Doesn't show up in single parenting, doesn't actually show up as much amongst pastors. Very few pastors are single parents. Have more kids. The average pastor has 2.7 kids. I know that it's impossible to have 2.7 kids. It's a average, so that rounds up to 3 kids, whereas the average US adult has 1.9. So on average, pastors have one more kid than all other US adults. This is fascinating. And I might not be the expert to give you all the ins and outs of this. They are just as likely to experience divorce. 16% of pastors have experienced a divorce in their lifetime, compared to 18% of all US adults. That's just real. It's part of the time that we're living in. Pastors don't get exempt from it. They're not insulated from it. Marriages fall apart, and it's no different inside the church than outside the church. They're also more likely to get remarried post-divorce. So 73% of pastors who have been divorced at some point in their life got remarried, compared to only 55% of US adults who have ever been divorced. That's really fascinating. That means that you can insinuate that there's a part of pastoring that people might feel like they have to be married, that single pastoring might be so daunting that pastors are more likely than all others to move into a second marriage. Not necessarily the expert to talk to you about why that is. We've got some hypotheses over here, but you get a great snapshot here of why might the pastor marriage be a little bit more complicated than what all US adults are experiencing, or a different kind of complexity, let's say. Let's also look into the pastor's home. In this research, we were really interested in understanding, well, what is the vibrancy of the pastor's home? What did they do together in this home? What are their rhythms and disciplines like? For us, this meant looking like having them tell us, well, what would you say your family thrives at? What are you really strong at? The pastor's home is very warm. 82% of pastors say that we're really great at celebrating each other. We're really great at finding belonging in a faith community. We value peace with one another, relational harmony. 72% of pastors also say we have a healthy and visible faith, and that we express gratitude towards one another. It displays that the pastor's home is really relationally warm. On the flip side, we then ask them, well, what are you struggling with? Uh, they tell us that their family has room to grow with physical health, patience, emotions, and expressing their emotions in healthy ways, talking together about what God is doing in their life, and financial health and stability. What this sounds like to me is kind of the normal human experience. There's not isolation from things like good physical health, the need for patience across the pastoring marriage and pastoring home. Pastors are humans too. Let's dig a little bit more into the pastor's marriage. We asked a series of questions about asking, tell us about the quality of your marriage. Tell us about what kind of marriage you have. And 76% of pastors tell us, my spouse or partner is my best friend. 53% say, my spouse or partner understands the struggles I experience in life. 52% say my spouse or partner and I communicate in an open and healthy manner. And only 3% of pastors say my spouse and partner and I experience a lot of conflict. If you include the somewhat true, that gets up to about 1 out of 4 who are at least willing in an anonymized survey to tell us that they experience some amount of conflict. So pastors tend to share this very happy, positive picture of marriage and their marital relationship. I was really interested in the conflict piece, and so we dug a little bit more into it. We asked pastors, how satisfied are you with how you and your spouse handle conflict? And 28% say very satisfied. 54% say somewhat satisfied, and the rest say not satisfied to some regard. So that's about 1 out of 6. Um, what's super interesting is we were really interested in what are some of the superpowers of the household. And what we find is that communication goes such a long way. And I'm sure every single person here understands this to some regard. But when you cut the data and you look at pastors who say that they communicate in a healthy and open way with their spouse, 48% of them say that they are satisfied with how they handle conflict, compared to almost 1 out of 3 pastors who say we do not communicate in an open and healthy way, they are less satisfied. So it's really incredible to see, okay, few pastors say they experience conflict, but we can increase our satisfaction with how we go about conflict when we communicate openly. Last area I want to talk about is let's talk a little bit about parenting as a pastor. 90% of pastors have kids. And what you all know, the data rings true as well. A lot of pastors tell us very clearly that there's a lot of external forces that complicate parenting as a pastor. This looks like a large number of pastors saying, I worry my kids feel pressure to behave a certain way because of who I am and because of my role. I'm fearful that my parenting will be judged because of my role. An extra layer of pressure felt by this audience. We also looked into what struggles does the pastor have when it comes to parenting. So first, we talked to them about what kind of issues they face as a person. They tell us things like the top things that I struggle with as a person when it comes to my parenting is finances. 32% of pastors say they struggle with this, and this was the top ranked item. After that, it's managing my own screen time and technology use, followed by helping my children with their interpersonal relationships with others. Maybe think back to the beginning. If a pastor struggles with relationships, they probably are aware of how that shows up within their kids' generation as well. 27% also say I need to help addressing my own mental health and self-care and managing my children's technology use. On the right now, same data on the left, we see that when we ask pastors, hey, what do you struggle with when it comes to your kids? The first thing they come back to is relationships again, helping my children with their interpersonal relationships. 27% say managing their technology use. 22% screens, again, getting them away from their screens, navigating my children's anxiety and ensuring my children feel understood. We did a lot of this research amongst all US adults and all married adults and all parents as well. And one of the most interesting things we learned in here is that pastors, in comparison to all other parents, are a lot more concerned about technology and screen use than the average parent. There's something about being a pastor and a pastor parent that helps the pastors see that there's something about technology that's not working right with young people today and with children today. Um, I hope that this has been engaging for you, and I'm so excited for the rest of our conversation today. I'm going to invite Glenn and Sharon to come back on and transition this into our next time. I'll also be available in the chat if other questions come up. So thrilled that you are all here today. Be well. Thanks.
That was amazing, Daniel. Listen, several of you asked if you'll have access to the slides, and the answer is yes. You'll have access to the full replay of the webinar and slides when it's over. Hey, Sharon, one thing that stood out to you. Yeah.
So I would be curious, someone mentioned this in the chat, and I thought this was a really good point. The data around flourishing in our relationships, because it's not parsed out between marriage and friendships,
Mm.
I would be, and that's almost an entirely different conversation on its own of how many pastors have a good support system of friends. And I'm
Mhm.
curious if that pulled the score down at all. And still, it is really interesting to me, and this is all self-reporting, and so there's a degree of, subjectivity to this, but how on the one hand, pastors are saying, we're really great at communicating. My spouse is my best friend. Like, all of that can be true. And yet at the same time, our scores and relationships, or even just the fact that pastors are just as likely to divorce as the average American, is really telling that maybe we have accepted as normal things that perhaps are not healthy, that the ability to see ourselves in our marriage honestly is still kind of a challenge for pastors. I don't really know what it means, but that stood out to me.
Yeah, for me, it was actually the couple things that they said they're not doing well on, and like physical health was mentioned there, and then expressing emotions, or like being patient and then expressing emotions. And that all speaks to me about attending to yourself, your inner world, and your physical embodied self. And I can relate to that. I think back about that similar time period in life and in marriage, about 10 years ago, about 15 years into marriage and ministry. I think it's very easy to think, well, I'm doing the Lord's work. It's very stressful. A plate of nachos late at night is okay, and on it goes. And there's nothing wrong with that, too, as far as it goes. But I think we might stay away from the big vices and still not be moving towards health. And I think there's a difference there, and I think what we want to help people say is, look, you're going to experience stress. We talk about this in the Resilient Pastor stuff. It's not about living life at a flat line or living life at the high. You're going to experience the ups and downs of life. The question is, how well do you recover? What's your rate of recovery? And so health, that's one of the markers of health. And there are things we can do physically with food and exercise. There are things we can do with our emotions, journaling, space, prayer. I've learned I need a recovery day after Sunday, before I can show up well to friends and to family. So I think that's big. Hey, I want to mention something here. We're going to show a video of this, but I want to validate one of the comments that was made here. It said, how many of this, since it was restricted to senior pastors, how many of them were women? And then relatedly, what if the spouses were allowed to weigh in on the state of their marriage? To your point, Sharon, about like self-reporting, So anyway, that'd be interesting. Okay. There is Sharon and Ike, my wife Holly and I, and then Rich and Rosie spent some time earlier this year recording a brand new course called Resilient Marriage. And we're very, very excited about it. And so we wanted you to see a trailer, and we wanted you to also hear a clip from Rich and Rosie, since they couldn't join us on this webinar. So let's watch this together.
Ministry takes a toll on marriage. But what if we told you that investing in your marriage is one of the most important things that you can do for your leadership?
In Resilient Marriage for Pastors, we'll walk through practical steps to help you move from reactivity to presence, from conflict to communication, and from communication to connection.
We want to equip you with the tools to build a marriage that not only survives ministry, but thrives in it. And the best part, it's available on Right Now Pastor Plus.
Sign up today and start investing in your marriage.
Many pastors struggle with relational health and their own self-care, and this certainly applies to our marriages. We are called to not merely get by in our marriages, but to thrive, to experience something of the life of God.
That's right. And Scripture gives us a vision for what this could be. In Ephesians 5, Paul writes, "For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh." This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband.
There's something really mysterious about marriage. How and why people fall in love can at times be a mystery. But beyond the mystery of how we find ourselves married to our spouse, there's another mystery, a profound mystery. The mystery that our marriages as followers of Jesus are not about us. Our marriages are fundamentally about Christ and the church.
Our marriages point to something beyond ourselves. Another way of saying it is our marriages are a sign pointing to a bigger story. At some point in the future, there will be a joining of Christ in the church. But in the meantime, our married lives are to be a window into another reality.
All of this is true, and yet to live together in such a way that points to what is to come can be very difficult because life gets hard. Schedules get full, values conflict. We all face the normal pressures that come with managing money, navigating sexual intimacy, parenting, and the everyday tensions that come our way. And we're reminded that loving the person who you are married to can be quite the challenge.
Yeah, and I like how Mother Teresa said it. It is easy to love people far away. It's not always easy to love those close to us. It's easier to give a cup of rice to relieve hunger than to relieve the loneliness and pain of someone unloved in our own home. Bring love into your home, for this is where our love for each other must start. To live out the gospel in our marriage, it can be healing and life-giving. If you're married, this is the primary place to work out our faith. The love we cultivate in our marriages can be one of the greatest gospel messages we preach.
You know, to be a married Christian couple is a holy thing, and it's hard work. God intends that our marriages be life-giving, joyful, and fulfilling, but it requires something of us. It requires that we take the mystery seriously. It means that we hold on to the truth that our marriages are to be missional, meaning we don't just get married in a church, but for the church, for the world, for the gospel.
That was cool seeing that. That's the first time Sharon and I have seen kind of that finished product, huh? That was cool. The Resilient Marriage for Pastors and more courses like that for church leaders are actually available on Right Now Pastors Plus. That's an upgrade from Right Now Media. So if you have a Right Now Media account, just upgrade it a little bit to the Right Now Pastors Plus subscription, and then your entire church leadership team can get access to practical training, courses, hands-on resources, consultant level guidance from some of the most trusted voices in ministry today. So you can visit rightnowpastors.org/plus, or there's a QR code right there on the screen. So that's great. Sharon, why don't you tell us about the panel that we're going to hear from in a moment?
Yeah, so we have two couples that are joining us to reflect on this data. The first is Bishop Claude and Lady Kim Alexander, who lead the Park Church congregation in Charlotte, North Carolina, and have been married for 31 years. So welcome, you guys. I am also from Charlotte, so I feel like y'all are my buddies. And then I also want to introduce Faith Yuri Cho and Dave Cho, who co-planted and lead Mosaic Covenant Church in New Jersey and have been married for 15 years. So hi, guys. Thanks for joining us. And I wanted to open the floor again just to reflect some on the data that Daniel just covered. And the first is I want to hear just your initial reactions. What was one stat or insight that especially stood out to you and why? And I want to hear first from the Alexanders, if y'all are good to lead us off.
Sure. I think the statistic dealing with flourishing relationships being so low, even below practicing Christians, was a little alarming, especially because of the value of friendship in marriage. It just seemed to be a big contrast between the two. And it made me wonder if the value and the quality of relationships that pastors have, and because they are dealing with relationships much more frequently than the general population, if that contributed to it.
The other thing that hit me was the role and impact of technology and screens, and that being a relatively new phenomenon, probably 20 years or less, right? Whereas the issues of financial stress and mental health and self-care, those are constant. You would have found those 20 years ago. And so the things that are new and how they add to what already is being felt and found.
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks
Faith
for
and
having
Dave?
us. Yeah, thanks for having us. I mean, I would agree in the stat of the relationships for pastors and just how that impacts relationships, a marriage particularly. And I think when marriages are in a silo, it's difficult to know what's normal, like are we doing okay? Like, you know, I think there was a period when Dave and I were like, wait, I think we're doing all right. And I think, you know, it took a minute, you know, because for a while we were doing marriage in a silo. But when we're connected with other people, it made a huge difference.
Yeah, and I just want to echo, I think Sharon, you hit on this part, but the low flourishing score, but also how a lot of these spouses still call their spouse their best friend, some of the discontinuity between that, and just kind of wondering what was behind that and why that was even the case. And I know I've been in that place as well, where I've said my wife is my best friend, but yet we were still not doing well behind the scenes, and you know, just something to work through with that.
Dave, I appreciate that vulnerability, and actually it kind of segues to the next question I want to get to, which is, was there a time, a season in life where, you know, ministry by all external signs was flourishing? Sometimes, and this is the curse of ministry in the West, we judge flourishing by numbers and giving and attendance and all, you know, so there's external quote unquote markers of success, but then behind the scenes, you felt like your marriage was struggling, maybe not in crisis, but just there's a something you were stuck in, a pattern, or maybe, and I'd love, you know, Faith and Dave, if you guys would lead off on this one, and then I'd love to hear from Bishop Claude and Lady Kim.
Yeah, I'll start off. You know, I mean, we're church planters right now, and you know, for the past 5 years. So when you say external markers of success, I don't know how that feels yet. So, you know, I mean, yes, but you know, we're still in it. But I would say, yeah, there's moments when our working relationship would be doing great. And then when you turn all that off and we're like, so what should we watch? You know, like, and we just kind of forget, wait, like, when's the last time we just played? Like, just played as humans, you know? And then there's times when our relationship is actually doing great, but then our working relationship can, you know, use some work, and we have to really revisit and recommunicate. Okay, how are we going to go back and forth on this? So I think the fact that there's just so many layers to a relationship in ministry has been the nuanced journey that I feel like not a lot of people could fully relate with.
That's good.
Yeah, and to even hit back on that best friend thing, I realized there were times when I would say my wife was my best friend, but truth be told, she was actually just my only friend. And realizing that I didn't have relationships outside.
It's very vulnerable, Dave. Very vulnerable.
Yeah, it's just the truth. She was my only friend. And realizing I had no relationships, not even like a healthy, like just non-existent relationships outside of my wife. And so, like, I think there's something there to just understanding, hey, like, in order for certain relationships, my relationship, my wife, to thrive, there also requires another level of relationships, friendships that are beyond just my only relationship, who I claim to call my best friend, but truly should be my only friend.
Alexander's.
Yeah, I was thinking about what you said about those first 7 years in the cycles. And I would say when I married Claude, he was pastoring for 3 years. And once we got married, the church just began to really expand and grow. And that, I think, was some of the toughest time. And I think also it contributed to the fact that we were newly married and I was adjusting to a whole new environment. So I just was lost and it was really challenging. And he was traveling constantly all the time, like throughout the whole week and only home on the weekends. And so it was just so difficult. I mean, and when we first got married, I think on our honeymoon, both of us were like, oh my gosh, we have ruined our lives. What did we do? It was like, oh, I don't know what has happened. But God has just been so faithful. I just think that those early years of me trying to figure out what is it to just be his wife, and then the church on top of that just added so much more, that it was just really challenging for us. Because there wasn't a lot of communication. We were new at trying to figure things out.
Yeah, the honeymoon was the worst week of our whole marriage.
Yes.
I mean, it was just terrible. And the fact that I was paying to have a terrible week, it was just bad. It was
Awful.
Oh man.
because
we need a whole nother webinar to hear about that, Bishop.
No, you don't.
right. I knew what it was to be single. I knew what it was to be a single and a pastor. Right. I knew what it was to have space as a single, but now there was this invasion of space and adjustment in terms of space and time and each other. Fortunately, we had a congregation that gave us grace and space. And I think that is another dimension that maybe isn't in the survey, but how a congregation is with the pastor and his or her spouse and family goes a long way to the matter of the stresses and the pulls and pushes that they do or don't experience, and how well they come through it.
So good. Thank you.
So I wanted to ask you guys a question that we actually did not send you in advance, and so I'm just gonna let y'all. I'm throwing you a curveball, but I think it's important. And someone raised this in the chat, and this is why I'm bringing it up. Someone had mentioned feeling like a fraud because they, as pastors, we are doing pastoral counseling while we are navigating our own struggles. And I'm gonna start out by sharing my answer to this to give you a little bit of time, because I want to hear how you have navigated this as well. But one thing that was helpful for me years ago, I was talking to someone in our church who's a psychiatrist, and I said to him, are you just like really good at relationships because you're a licensed counselor, and so you know all the hacks, and you know how to, not be reactive, and how to listen, and how to practice active listening and all of that. And he said, no, I'm not uniquely good at relationships. And the way he described his work as a counselor is, he said, imagine if you are rock climbing and you're on the face of this cliff, and you're trying to figure out, okay, where to go next. Because you're on the cliff, you can't really see. You can see kind of what's directly in front of you, but you can't zoom out and see, hey, there's actually like a ledge over here that I can grab onto. He said the role of a counselor is that person who's farther out and can say, hey, there's this spot over here that you can't see from your vantage point, but because I have distance, I can see that. And I thought that was such a helpful way of describing really so much of what we're doing as pastoral counselors. Is we are not coming in as the people who are perfect. We are not coming in as the people who are polished, who have mastered any of this, but we are coming in as a different perspective, a different vantage point, where I'm not in the thick of what you're going through right now. I have this broader perspective, and I can give you this outside perspective that isn't contingent upon necessarily what's going on in my personal life. Now, obviously, there are times where there could be a disintegration between what's going on personally and what you are actually, like a hypocrisy, essentially. But I was curious for you guys how you have navigated when to say, I actually need to take a break right now from doing this, versus this is going on in my personal life, but that doesn't disqualify me from speaking into the lives of people in my church.
good.
So, Alexanders, I'm going to put the spotlight on you first to give an answer to a question I didn't prepare you for.
Sure. So initially, in the early of the years, I did a lot of the counseling. And then we were able to bring people on whose specialty was that, and I was able to back off. So, but to answer how I see it, I think number one, the distance. Second, I think that we are in formation even as we are doing counseling.
Mm.
And so as we are providing a distance and perspective for individuals, we are also internalizing and questioning and seeing where we are in terms of that. And out of that, we are then called to respond the same way that we are providing opportunities for those individuals whom we are counseling to respond. In one way, we probably would not think as deeply if we weren't involved in the counseling. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I just
good.
would add, it reminds us that we don't have a cape, that we are human, and it keeps us humble and keeps us remembering that God is showing us something through those experiences as well that we need to look at and how to submit those things unto Him.
So good.
Faith and Dave.
Yeah, I think, I mean, all that I can resonate with so much from the Alexanders. And I think when you're helping other people as a pastor and as a counselor, your inner child isn't really involved because that hat is kind of off. If anything, that inner child comes out the most with your spouse. I think where I have to at least keep myself in check is knowing when you're hearing the marital issues of your congregants, knowing when a part of you is starting to project, like you're hearing it from the filter of your own issues and your own problems. Like, wow, why did he do it like that? Like, you know what I mean? And I think that's kind of when, you know what, like I have to put that part aside and like truly listen objectively and with mercy and grace, and so it's not to say at all that it's not related. I do think it could be. But kind of what you were saying, Sharon, about climbing that cliff. You can't quite see the whole thing because when you're with your spouse, there is so many layers to you that requires attention from your spouse that you do not need from your congregants.
It's good.
Yeah, and sorry, Sharon, I think I didn't really understand the question. Can you repeat it? Like again,
I
real
was
quick?
just curious in terms of that imposter syndrome that we can feel as pastors when we are counseling someone in their marriage, when we know our own stuff that we're going through. How have you navigated that so that, because obviously we don't want to ever be hypocrites. And I think that gets to, what the Alexander said about, like, you aren't coming in here as the hero. I think if you're coming in that way as the expert, as the one who's perfected it, you are going to engage in hypocrisy. But if there's any other insight you wanted to share on how you've navigated that struggle.
Yeah, and I think to kind of echo the Alexanders and to my wife, I think for me, coming in as an avid listener and someone who's like just really keen on listening to not just both sides of the conversation, but even to just hear from the Lord and to hear what God's perspective is on what's going on here. Because I do the majority of the pastoral counseling in our church, and it is something that I do enjoy and feel very called to. And so it'll be very easy for us to even take sides, especially if it's just one perspective, but to hear from God's perspective, just to be able to lean into what the Lord is saying in this marriage and conversation and in this session, I think has been really
really
important for
good.
me in terms of my perspective.
Okay, last one, guys. This is so good. And can I just say again, thank you for being real. Thanks for being human. I love the line, Lady Kim, about the no capes. Like, and I feel that in this webinar. There's a transparency here that's really refreshing. When you reflect on your marriages, and maybe even right now, what's a rhythm or a practice that you've embraced as a couple that's really made a big difference in helping you become more resilient amidst the pressures of life and of ministry? And it need not be, we're not searching for a silver bullet, the magic secret key. It could just be one thing, and sometimes it is those little unsuspected, yeah, oh wow, that actually is tilting us 1 degree in the right direction. Alexanders, I'd love to start with you guys.
Sure, you can let me.
Go ahead.
One of the things I would say is just intentionality about time together. We plan, and he blocks off the calendar that we're going to take 2 days here, we're going to take a week here. I mean, that's on the calendar before anything else gets there. So just the habit of making time to spend together away from everything. Another kind of rhythm I think that really works for us is making time for fun and walking, trying
Yes.
to walk together, whether it's late at night after we eat or just a walk, talk, presence, time together. So,
I think that there has to be a fundamental shift in terms of what we think is the best thing that we offer the congregation. I've come to believe that the best things that I offer the congregation, one is a healthy me, two, a healthy marriage, three, healthy family, and then come the sermons and everything
Amen.
else. And that is a fundamental shift in terms of priority, and then you start organizing around that.
That's right. That's right. Amen. 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 Faith and Dave.
Oh, yeah. I would say a couple things. I mean, just for context, we have 4 young children, and I do have a traveling aspect to my ministry where no 1 week is the same. So to incorporate a rhythm that looks the same every week is difficult for us. So I would say, but the one thing that stays the same between me and my husband nearly all the time is every morning he actually makes me coffee.
Dave. What a
Every
guy.
morning.
What a guy.
Every morning, and breakfast, but I would say the coffee is the most consistent. And I think just something about just feeling really safe, creating an atmosphere of just safety, and my husband does a great job in making sure that I feel safe, so it's not so much event oriented, like trying to add something or I mean, like we try, but like I said, certain schedules may not permit for things to happen at the same time every single week. But I think one thing that's been such a blessing is my husband has been doing a great job in cultivating this atmosphere of levity, because ministry is so heavy. We'll wrestle sometimes, and we'll joke around or things like that. And just even starting the day off with, my husband making me coffee and asking me how I slept. It just really makes such a difference, at least for me, in the relationship.
On a practical and very personal level for me, on my daily prayer rhythm practice, I've incorporated a section of intercession specifically for my wife and my family. Before it would be like ministry, my sermon, myself, my calling. And I realized, oh wait, we are one. And for me to intercede and to hear from the Lord on a daily practical level for my wife has been a big game changer for me in terms of me loving and serving my wife.
That's great, man. All of those are so beautiful, so helpful. I love even the simplicity of it. I was resonating with the walk thing. I mean, I think all of those little things. As we come in for a close here, I want to just highlight a couple things, or just sort of pull some threads together. I said earlier that one way of thinking about resilience is its recovery. It's not that you never experience duress, but that you recover and you return. But another element of resilience is recalibration. You don't have to go into this next season the way you lived the last season. You're not stuck. I think one of the to be in the image of God is to carry a sense of agency, is to carry a sense of I can do something about this. And so, what we heard from our panelists, and thank you, Alexanders, thank you, Chose, for being with us. Thank you for those contributions, were amazing. And what you heard from our panelists is just this idea of there are some things you can begin to change in your life. There's some things you can begin to alter and adjust in your life. And I want to just name three of them. The Alexanders talked about a getaway, a retreat. You guys, they've been doing it probably a lot longer, 40 plus years of marriage. My wife Holly and I, for 12 to 15 years now, we do the same thing. We take some years we're able to do it. It's harder. It was harder when the kids were younger. But 2 of these retreats a year where we take time away to reflect back on the season we've come out of, pray and listen about the season we're about to enter, and then recalibrate our life rhythms or practices along 5 key spheres. So I just want to encourage you, some of you, this webinar is not the be-all, end-all, and even the Barna CTAs are not the be-all, end-all. Ultimately, our hope for you is that you find a way to go, okay, how can we create something in our own life where we make space to be different, and maybe a retreat can be part of that. I also want to affirm something Sharon named, several of you have named this, Dave, you named this, about relationships. It takes a constellation of relationships to help us be resilient and to be healthy. The Apostle Paul had sages, he had friends, he had peers, he had mentors, mentees, people he's investing in. And so your spouse can't be your be-all, end-all relationally. You need mentors. You need peers. A gathering like this, I'm seeing in the chat, some of you are like, are you in Canada? Oh, we're over here. Look at this retreat. I love all that stuff because you need people who are doing the same role but different context. And then you need people who are in the same context but different role. In other words, people who are in your community but not pastors. And then you need pastors who are not in your community. So, and you need therapists and counselors, people who are trained as healers to help you, And so I just want to encourage some of you, there's no shame in struggling in your marriage. There's no shame in being at a place where you need help, but I want to encourage you to get that help, seek out that help, fill out your constellation with healers and sages and, all of that, peers and companions. Finally, we do want to mention some of these CTAs here, and I think we'll put this on the screen. There is a Barna report. The relationships of today's pastors, Daniel gave us a tease, but this is the full kind of written version of all of this. Scan that QR code and get this. It's excellent. Really, really helpful. And then the Right Now Marriage course is the next slide here. We've talked about this already, but the Right Now Pastors Plus has a number of training things, but there's some specific marriage ones that we got to contribute to and hope that you'll be inspired by. Sharon, final thoughts and then a prayer?
Just to echo your last point is wise counsel, wise counsel, wise counsel. That in the same way we are that standing away from the cliff, giving perspective on people in our church, we need people doing the same for us who have that perspective and permission to speak into our marriages as well. I really cannot emphasize that enough. And so on that note, I would be honored to pray for everyone who has joined us. I know there's so much we didn't cover, but I'm going to end by praying over all the different things that are happening in your marriages today. Loving Father, I know that you know every story of every person who has tuned in for this webinar. People joined for different reasons, different motives, different needs. You know every single one. You care about every single one. You see them all. And so I pray that by the power of your Holy Spirit, there was some insight, some wisdom that ministered to the hearts and minds of every person here who is serving you, who is in the trenches. I pray protection over the marriages that are represented here today. I rebuke the schemes of the enemy. I pray against lies of isolation, of imposter syndrome. Truly, one of the takeaways for me is that our our weakness is one of the things that makes us good counselors, that makes us wise counselors, is that we are made perfect. Our power is made perfect in weakness, and we don't have to be ashamed. We don't have to hide. That is actually a great strength in the kingdom of God. And so I pray against any of that shame. I pray for power, for confidence that does not come from our ability to do marriage perfectly. It comes from being known and loved by you. We thank you that we have that love, we have that comfort, we have that confidence today, and it's in your name we pray. Amen.
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 Thanks for joining us, guys.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.